being terminated. I did nothing wrong.
Lena, we both know that's not true.
Arthur's voice cracked on the other end of the line. The board just invoked Clause 27B. My God, what exactly is your real job? I stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug warming my palm, watching the sunrise paint the glass towers across the harbor in shades of copper and gold. Beautiful morning. Perfect weather for watching someone's world collapse. Arthur, I said, keeping my voice level, you sound upset? Upset? He was breathing hard, like he'd just climbed stairs. Ethan, they suspended my daughter. They're talking about stripping her equity. The board chair mentioned your name 3 times in the emergency session. What the hell is going on? I took a slow sip of coffee. Ethiopian blend, medium roast. Lena always said I had pedestrian taste in everything. I think you should ask Lena what's going on. I'm asking you. Fair enough. I set the mug down on the marble counter, the one Lena had insisted we needed because it made a statement. I'm a corporate risk and governance consultant. I've been contracted by your board for the past 8 months to review certain irregularities in strategic partnerships and contract awards. Silence. Then quieter. You work for the board? I work for the board of the company where your daughter is chief strategy officer, yes? Well, was chief strategy officer. I assume that's changed as of this morning. But you're IT. You're a systems manager or something. That's what everyone thinks. It's easier that way. NDAs, confidentiality agreements, you understand? High-level business and all that. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. Arthur Klein, former CEO, current chairman emeritus, proud father. He'd always looked at me like I was a moderately acceptable appliance his daughter had purchased. Functional, forgettable. The guy who fixed the Wi-Fi when they visited. What did she do? His voice had gone hollow. You should really ask her that question. But since you called me, I'll give you the short version. Your daughter has been conducting an undisclosed romantic relationship with Victor Hale, CEO of Stratton Analytics. You know, your company's primary data analytics partner. The one currently negotiating a $15 million contract extension that Lena herself is championing. Clause 27B exists specifically to prevent this kind of conflict of interest. That's... He trailed off. Are you certain? I have emails, calendar overlaps, hotel reservations, expense reports, and security footage from 3 different business hotels, plus my own eyewitness observation from yesterday when I saw them together at the Harborfield Grand. So yes, Arthur, I'm certain. Jesus Christ. The board takes ethics violations seriously. You helped write those policies, if I remember correctly. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had aged a decade. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone in the family? I picked up my coffee again, watching the steam rise. Because I'm not in the business of family drama, Arthur. I'm in the business of protecting corporate interests. The board hired me to do a job. I did it. What happens next is between Lena, the board, and a very expensive lawyer she'll need to retain. This will destroy her. That depends on what you mean by destroy. She'll lose her position, certainly. The equity is complicated. But she'll survive. People like Lena always do. People like Lena, he repeated bitterly. You're talking about my daughter. I'm talking about someone who looked me in the eye last night and said I wouldn't understand how high-level business works. Right before she lied about where she was going and with whom. I paused. Let that sink in. So forgive me if I'm not overflowing with sympathy. He hung up without another word. Then I set it down next to my coffee and pulled up my encrypted work email on my tablet. The board chair had sent a message at 6:47 a.m. Suspension executed. Emergency board meeting scheduled for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow to formalize termination proceedings. Your presence required. Well done. Well done. Like I just delivered a satisfactory quarterly report instead of orchestrating the professional execution of my own wife. Wife. The word felt strange now. Past tense, really, even if the paperwork hadn't caught up yet. Let me back up. You're probably wondering how we got here. How a boring IT guy ended up holding the knife at his wife's career's throat. Fair question. 24 hours earlier, everything looked different. Lena had been packing for her trip, moving through our apartment with that focused energy she got when she was in work mode. Designer luggage open on the bed, blouses and pencil skirts arranged with military precision. She'd already laid out her jewelry, the pieces that said, "I'm important, but not trying too hard." The presentation is Tuesday morning, she said, not looking at me. Victor thinks we can close the partnership expansion if we nail the pitch to their board. Victor. She said his name the way other people said chocolate or vacation. Little spark of pleasure in her voice she probably didn't even notice anymore. I was sitting in the reading chair by the window, laptop open, pretending to review some mundane systems documentation. Sounds like a big deal. It is. This could position us as the dominant player in logistics analytics for the entire East Coast market. She zipped a garment bag closed. I'll probably be back Thursday, maybe Friday. Depends on how the follow-up meetings go. And these meetings are where again? Harborfield Grand. They're flying in some of their international board members, so we're doing the whole thing at their conference center. She finally glanced at me. It's all very last minute, very high pressure. You know how it is. Right? She crossed to the closet, pulled out her good heels. Actually, you probably don't. No offense, but this level of strategic negotiation, it's not really your world. There it was, the little cut. She was good at those, never quite mean enough to start a fight, just enough to remind me where I stood in her mental hierarchy. I'm sure I'd be lost, I said agreeably. It's not an insult, Ethan. We just work in different spheres. I deal with executive strategy, major partnerships, board-level decisions. You deal with servers and security protocols and whatever. Both important. Just different. Different, I echoed. She smiled, the one that had probably closed 100 deals. Exactly. Anyway, I need to finish packing. Can you make sure the Lexington file gets uploaded to the shared drive? I might need to reference it during the trip. Sure thing. She disappeared into the bathroom. I heard water running, the sounds of her evening routine. I sat there with my laptop, watching the cursor blink on my screen. The Harborfield Grand. Same hotel where the board had scheduled their quarterly off-site review session. The one I'd be attending as their risk consultant, officially there to present my preliminary findings on contract irregularities and potential conflicts of interest. Funny how these things line up. I pulled up my calendar. Board session started Tuesday at 8 a.m. Coffee and continental breakfast at 7:30. I'd requested a room for Monday night, professional courtesy, all expenses covered. Lena's presentation to Stratton's board was Tuesday at 10 a.m., according to the meeting invite I'd seen in her Outlook calendar during one of my authorized server reviews. 2 hours after my session with our board would begin, I closed my laptop. She came back out, face freshly washed, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Back when I still thought buying nice things might make her look at me differently. You're quiet, she observed. Just tired. Long day. Tell me about it. I've been in meetings since 7 this morning. She sat on the edge of the bed, started applying some kind of cream to her hands. Victor's been pushing so hard on this deal. He really believes in the potential. He sounds passionate. He is. It's actually refreshing. Most of the executives I work with are so cautious, so risk-averse. Victor sees opportunities and goes after them. She looked at me. You'd like him, actually. He's very sharp, very analytical. Reminds me a little of you, but with more drive. More drive. Translation. More ambition, more status, more money, more of everything I apparently lacked. Sounds like quite a guy. He is. She finished with her hands, stood up. I'm exhausted. I need to sleep. We're wheels up at 6 a.m. Private charter? Victor's company is covering it. Cheaper than commercial for groups, and we can work en route. Of course. Victor's company, the one currently billing Lena's company for services while simultaneously courting a major contract expansion that Lena was personally championing. No conflict there. No, sir. She slipped into bed, turned off her lamp. Night. Lena. I could have said it then. Could have laid it all out. The evidence, the timeline, the board investigation, my real job, everything. Could have given her a chance to explain, to come clean, to maybe salvage something. Instead, I said, Have a good trip. Thanks. She was already half asleep. Don't forget about that Lexington file. I won't. I sat there in the dark for a while after her breathing evened out into sleep. The city lights filtered through our floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shadows across the expensive furniture, the curated art, the lifestyle magazine perfection of our apartment. Everything looked cold, clean, empty. I thought about the first time I'd met Arthur, 5 years ago at some company holiday party. He'd shaken my hand with the grip of a man used to testing people, measuring them. So you're the one, he'd said. IT management, right? Systems architecture and security, I'd corrected politely. Right. Important work. Someone's got to keep the lights on. Then he'd turned to someone more interesting, someone with a better title, and I'd spent the rest of the evening being introduced as Lena's husband, he's in computers. Lena had squeezed my arm later that night, tipsy on champagne. Daddy liked you. He said you seemed steady. Steady. Steady meant boring. Steady meant safe. Steady meant I'd never embarrass her at company events or make scenes or demand too much attention. Steady meant invisible. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and walked out to the balcony. Cool night air hit my face. Below, the city hummed with traffic and life and 1,000 other people's problems. I pulled up a text thread with the board chair. Our messages were always brief, professional, encrypted. Me. Confirmed visual observation tomorrow as discussed. We'll have preliminary report ready for Tuesday session. His reply came 30 seconds later. Understood. This stays confidential until board meeting. No exceptions. Me. Understood. I looked back through the window at Lena's sleeping form, barely visible in the darkness of our bedroom. She'd lied so smoothly, so casually, like I was too simple to notice, too beneath her to bother with the truth. You wouldn't understand, she'd said earlier that evening, smirking. This is how high-level business works. Okay, I'd thought. Okay, if that's how you want to play, let's play. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. The Harborfield Grand rose 30 stories above the waterfront, all glass and steel and expensive minimalism. I checked in Monday afternoon under the company account, took my keycard from a desk clerk who barely looked at me, and rode the elevator to the 14th floor. My room overlooked the harbor. Nice view. Nicer than what Lena thought I could afford on my IT salary. The firm spared no expense for their consultants, especially ones handling sensitive board matters. I unpacked my laptop, set up the encrypted connection, and started reviewing the final documentation for tomorrow's presentation. Emails, calendars, contract drafts, expense reports, everything carefully compiled, cross-referenced, verified. Nothing that required illegal access. Nothing that wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. That was the thing people never understood about this kind of work. You didn't need to hack phones or plant cameras or hire private investigators. Most people created their own paper trail. They got comfortable, careless. They used company email for personal conversations. They booked hotel rooms on corporate cards. They scheduled business meetings that happened to overlap with romantic getaways. They documented their own destruction, and people like me just had to read the documents. My phone buzzed. Lena. Landed safely. Hotel is gorgeous. About to head into dinner with the Stratton team. Miss you. Miss you. Complete with an exclamation point and a heart emoji. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, Great, have fun. No emoji, no exclamation point. Just basic punctuation for a basic husband. She didn't reply. Probably already at dinner, sitting next to Victor, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm the way she used to touch mine back when we first started dating, back when I was still new enough to be interesting. I set the phone aside and went back to work. Around 7 p.m., I went downstairs to the hotel bar. The board chair had suggested it as a good place to catch up informally before tomorrow's session. Neutral territory, he'd said. Less formal than the conference room. James Carrington was already there, sitting at a corner table with a scotch. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit that fit like it had been painted on. He'd been board chair for 3 years, and in that time, he'd built a reputation for running the tightest ship in the industry. Ethan. He stood, shook my hand. Glad you could make it down a day early. Seemed prudent, given the circumstances. We sat. A waiter appeared, and I ordered a bourbon. When he left, James leaned forward slightly. I reviewed your full report this morning. Thorough work. Very thorough. Thank you. The documentation is airtight. Emails between Mrs. Ward and Mr. Hale dating back 14 months. Hotel overlaps on 6 separate occasions, all billed as business travel. Calendar blocks that match up perfectly. Contract negotiations that show clear favoritism towards Stratton Analytics, despite competitive bids from other qualified firms. He took a sip of his scotch. Look, and all of this while she's been the primary decision-maker on vendor selection for strategic partnerships. That's correct. Arthur doesn't know yet. He does now. He called me this morning after you executed the preliminary suspension. James raised an eyebrow. How'd he take it? About as well as you'd expect. Shock, denial, anger. He asked what she did. I told him. And he hung up on me. He's going to fight this. You know that. Arthur's pride is tied up in Lena's success. Admitting she violated ethics policies, that she compromised the company's integrity, that's not something he'll accept easily. He doesn't have to accept it. He just has to look at the evidence. I paused as the waiter returned with my bourbon. When he left, I continued, Everything is documented. This isn't a matter of interpretation or opinion. She failed to disclose a personal relationship with a key vendor. She advocated for contracts that directly benefited that vendor. She used company resources to facilitate what was clearly a personal relationship. Clause 27B exists specifically for this scenario. I'm aware, but Arthur has influence, even as chair emeritus. He still has relationships with other board members, major shareholders. He could make noise. Let him make noise. The documentation speaks for itself. James studied me for a moment. You're very calm about all this. Should I not be? Most people in your position would be emotional, angry, hurt, vindictive, something. You're presenting this like it's just another business case. Isn't it? Is it? I took a drink, felt the burn. I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I'm not going to let that compromise the quality of my work or the integrity of the process. Lena violated clearly stated policies. The board hired me to identify and report on conflicts of interest and ethical breaches. I did my job. What happens next is a matter of policy enforcement, not personal revenge. Except it is personal. She's your wife. Was my wife in any way that matters? He nodded slowly. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you handled this exactly right. You came to us with concerns, we authorized a formal review, you conducted that review within the proper parameters, and now we're taking action based on clear policy violations. Nothing improper, nothing illegal, nothing that won't stand up to any scrutiny Arthur or anyone else might bring. That was the goal. Still, he swirled his scotch, ice clinking. Tomorrow's going to be uncomfortable. She's scheduled to be here, in this hotel, just 2 floors above us, giving her big presentation while we're in session discussing her termination. I'm aware. You think there's any chance she doesn't know you're here? She knows I travel, sometimes for work. She thinks I'm doing routine security audits for some mid-tier client in Chicago. That's what I told her last week. And she believed you. She always believes me. I'm steady, remember? Boring, predictable. Why would I lie? A small smile crossed James's face. I'm starting to understand why the board values your work. You're very good at being underestimated. It's a skill. We talked for another hour, going over logistics for tomorrow. The board session would start at 8, run until noon. My presentation would happen around 9:30, after preliminary business. Then we'd break for lunch while legal reviewed everything one final time, and the formal termination vote would happen at 2 p.m. Lena's presentation to Stratton's board was at 10 a.m. 2 floors up, maybe 300 feet away from where I'd be showing emails between her and Victor discussing everything from contract terms to hotel room preferences. What if she sees you? James asked as we were wrapping up. Then she sees me. And? And nothing. I'm here on legitimate business. She's here on what she claims is legitimate business. If we happen to cross paths, we cross paths. You're playing with fire, Ethan. No, I said. I'm just standing nearby while she burns herself down. There's a difference. I went back to my room around 9 p.m., checked my email, and found nothing urgent. The apartment felt strange in my absence, or maybe I felt strange thinking about it. That cold, perfect space with its designer furniture and its view of the harbor. Lena's space, really. I'd just been living in it. Around 10, I heard voices in the hallway. Laughter. A woman's voice I knew too well, and a man's voice I'd only heard on conference calls and in video presentations. I moved to the door, looked through the peephole. Lena and Victor, standing just a few doors down at what must have been her room. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen, something new and expensive. He had his hand on the wall beside her head, leaning in close. She was laughing at something he'd said, her face tilted up toward his. I watched as she fumbled with her keycard, giggling. He said something else, too quiet for me to hear, and she swatted his arm playfully. Then she got the door open, glanced down the hallway both ways, right past my door without really seeing it, and pulled him inside. The door clicked shut. I stood there for a moment, eyes still pressed to the peephole, looking at the empty hallway. Then I went back to my laptop and made a note in my report. Visual confirmation of ongoing personal relationship. Subject and Hale entered subject's hotel room together at approximately 22.13 hours. Professional. Documented. Admissible. I slept fine that night. Better than I had in months, actually. Maybe it was knowing that tomorrow everything would finally be out in the open. Maybe it was just relief that the waiting was almost over. My alarm went off at 6:12 a.m. I showered, dressed in my good suit, the one I saved for board presentations, and went downstairs for the breakfast buffet. The conference room was already being set up. I could see staff arranging chairs, testing the audiovisual equipment, setting out water bottles and legal pads. James arrived at 7:15, followed by other board members. I recognized most of them from previous meetings and company events. They nodded at me, professional courtesy, probably still not entirely sure what I did or why I was there. At 7:45, we filed into the conference room. Long table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the harbor. Power and money and decisions that affected thousands of lives. This was where Lena thought she belonged. The high-level business she kept telling me I wouldn't understand. Arthur showed up at 7:58, right before we were scheduled to start. He looked like he hadn't slept. His suit was immaculate as always, but his face was haggard. Older. He caught my eye across the table and held it for a moment, then looked away. James called the meeting to order at exactly 8:00 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for adjusting your schedules for this emergency session. As you're all aware, we have a serious matter to address regarding ethical violations and conflicts of interest at the executive level. Ethan Ward, our external risk consultant, has been conducting an authorized review of certain irregularities, and he has some findings to present. Ethan? I stood up, connected my laptop to the projector, and pulled up my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members. The first slide was simple. Ethics Review, Chief Strategy Officer position, findings and recommendations. Arthur's jaw tightened. I walked them through it methodically. Dates, times, communications, expenses. I showed them the emails where Lena and Victor discussed contract terms and language that was just a shade too familiar, too comfortable. I showed them the overlapping travel schedules, 6 separate occasions over 14 months. I showed them the contract awards that favored Stratton Analytics despite competitive bids, despite better pricing from other vendors, despite concerns raised by the procurement team. I showed them everything except the bedroom stuff. That wasn't relevant, and it wasn't appropriate for a board meeting. This was about business ethics, not personal morality. When I finished, the room was silent. James looked at the other board members. Questions? A woman named Patricia Chen, head of the audit committee, spoke first. The documentation appears comprehensive. Have you verified all of this independently? Everything you see is from company systems, company accounts, or publicly available sources. I have affidavits from hotel staff confirming personal bookings billed as business expenses. I have calendar exports showing the overlaps. I have contract files showing the bid evaluations and selection rationale, or lack thereof. Everything has been verified and cross-referenced. And Mrs. Ward's relationship with Mr. Hale is ongoing. As of last night, yes. I observed them together here at this hotel. Arthur stood up abruptly. This is absurd. You're talking about my daughter based on some travel schedules and email timestamps. People travel for business. People send emails. That doesn't prove anything. Arthur, James said quietly. Sit down. I will not sit down while this man, her husband, conducts some kind of witch hunt. It's not a witch hunt, I interrupted. It's a policy review. Clause 27B of our ethics guidelines requires disclosure of personal relationships with key vendors and partners. Your daughter failed to disclose her relationship with Victor Hale. That's a fact. She advocated for contracts with his company while personally involved with him. That's a fact. She used company resources to facilitate personal travel while claiming business purposes. That's a fact. Your feelings about it don't change those facts. You sanctimonious little... Arthur! James's voice cracked like a whip. Enough. Sit down or excuse yourself from this session. Those are your options. Arthur sat down, breathing hard. James turned to the rest of the board. I think we have sufficient evidence to proceed. The preliminary suspension remains in effect. I'm recommending we move forward with termination proceedings this afternoon after legal review. All in favor? Hands went up around the table. Not Arthur's, but enough. More than enough. Motion carries. We'll reconvene at 2 p.m. for the formal vote. Ethan, thank you for your thorough work on this. Please make sure legal has access to all your files and documentation. Already done. Excellent. This session is adjourned until 2. People started gathering their things, standing, stretching. Quiet conversations broke out. Arthur stood frozen in his chair, staring at the table. I packed up my laptop, disconnected from the projector. As I was heading for the door, Arthur's voice stopped me. Why didn't you come to me first? I turned. He was still sitting, looking up at me with something between anger and pleading. Why didn't you tell me what you suspected? Give her a chance to explain? She's my daughter, Ethan. We could have handled this quietly, as a family. Because I'm not family, Arthur. I'm the IT guy, remember? The one who wouldn't understand high-level business, the steady one, the boring one. I kept my voice level, conversational. You hired me to fix Wi-Fi, not to matter. So I stopped trying to matter to you or to her. I just did my job. This is the result. This will destroy her. No, this will cost her a job and some stock options. She'll survive. She'll land somewhere else, probably with a better title and more money, because people like Lena always do, but she won't do it here. and she won't do it with company resources she spent on her boyfriend. I walked out before he could respond. The hallway was empty. I checked my watch. 10:05 a.m. Lena's presentation had started 5 minutes ago. 2 floors up, she was probably dazzling Stratton's board with projections and synergies and strategic visions, completely unaware that 2 floors down, her career had just been voted into a coffin. I took the elevator up to my floor, went to my room, and changed out of the suit into something more casual. Then I went down to the lobby and found a quiet corner with a coffee shop view of the elevators. At 11:30, the elevator doors opened and Lena stepped out, Victor at her side. They were both smiling, energized. The presentation had clearly gone well. She was talking excitedly, gesturing with her hands. He was nodding, touching her lower back as they walked toward the exit. They passed within 10 feet of where I sat. She didn't see me. Why would she? She'd trained herself not to see me, except when she needed something uploaded or fixed or explained in small words. I watched them leave through the lobby doors, probably heading to some celebratory lunch, probably planning how they'd spend the millions from the expanded contract, probably not thinking about board meetings or ethics clauses or the husband they'd both underestimated. I finished my coffee. At 2:00 p.m., I was back in the conference room. The vote was quick, formal, unanimous. Arthur abstained. Lena Ward was terminated as Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately. Her equity was frozen pending review of additional policy violations. The contract with Stratton Analytics was suspended pending an independent audit of the selection process. James adjourned the meeting at 2:47 p.m. I went back to my room, packed my things, and checked out. The desk clerk processed my checkout with the same indifferent efficiency she'd used for check-in. Just another business traveler, just another room. I drove home through afternoon traffic, mind quiet. When I pulled into our building's garage, I saw Lena's car already there. She'd come back early. The apartment door was unlocked. I walked in to find her in the living room, still in her presentation clothes, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up when I entered, and her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, and then something harder. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, then hung up. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Chicago." Change of plans. "Were you—" She stopped, processed. "Were you at the Harborfield Grand?" "I was." "Were you at my presentation?" "No, I was at a board meeting. Different floor, different room. Same hotel." She stared at me. "What board meeting?" I set my bag down by the door. "Your board meeting. The one where they voted to terminate you for ethics violations related to undisclosed conflicts of interest. That board meeting." The color drained from her face. "Oh, what are you talking about?" "Clause 27B, Lena, remember that? The ethics policy your father helped write? The one that requires disclosure of personal relationships with key vendors and partners? You violated it, extensively, with Victor Hale, for over a year." "You," she struggled for words. "How do you know about Victor?" "Because I'm the one who documented it. I'm the consultant the board hired 8 months ago to review irregularities in contract awards and strategic partnerships. I'm the one who pulled the emails, tracked the travel schedules, verified the hotel bookings, and compiled the evidence that got you fired this afternoon." She sat down slowly on the couch, like her legs had stopped working. "You're not an IT manager." "No?" I'm exactly what I told Arthur this morning, a corporate risk and governance consultant. I specialize in ethics reviews, conflict of interest investigations, and policy compliance audits. I've been doing it for 12 years. I'm very good at it. Your board pays me more in a month than you thought I made in a year. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. Because you assumed. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you'd change the subject or make some comment about how I wouldn't understand your world. I shrugged. So I stopped trying to explain. I let you think I was small. Turned out that made my job easier. She stood up again, anger replacing shock. "You set me up. You spied on me. You went behind my back to the board." "I did my job. The board had legitimate concerns about contract irregularities. They hired me to investigate. I investigated. What I found was that their chief strategy officer was romantically involved with a key vendor while advocating for contracts worth millions to that vendor's company. That's a textbook conflict of interest. It's exactly what Clause 27B exists to prevent. We weren't doing anything illegal. No, just unethical. Just a massive breach of corporate governance. Just the kind of thing that gets executives fired and companies sued by shareholders." I walked past her toward the bedroom. "But you're right. Not illegal, just career-ending." "Where are you going?" "Packing. I'll be out by tonight." "You can't just leave." I stopped, turned to look at her. Really look at her. The woman I'd married 5 years ago. the one who'd promised to build a life with me, who'd slowly decided I wasn't worth building with. Yes, I can. You lied to me for over a year. You cheated on me with a business partner. You consistently made me feel small and stupid and irrelevant. And when I finally showed you that I'm none of those things, your first instinct was to accuse me of setting you up. So yeah, Lena, I can just leave. In fact, I think it's the only reasonable choice left. My father will hear about this. The board will. The board already knows. They voted. It's done. And your father? He abstained from the vote. He couldn't even bring himself to defend you once he saw the evidence. I headed for the bedroom. Get a lawyer. Get a good one. You're going to need it. Behind me, I heard her start to cry. Not the pretty, delicate tears she used strategically in negotiations. Real crying, ugly, broken sobs. I kept packing. I threw myself into work over the next 2 months. New clients, new investigations, new problems to solve that had nothing to do with Lena or Victor or any of it. I was good at the job, better than I'd given myself credit for. Companies paid serious money for someone who could find problems before they became disasters, who could navigate board politics, who understood both the technical and human sides of corporate ethics. The reputation I'd built from the Lena situation opened doors. Every company with a complicated governance issue wanted the consultant who'd handled that Ward case, the one where the executive's own husband had taken her down. They wanted someone who wouldn't blink at ugly truths, who'd document everything, who'd see through the corporate politeness to the reality underneath. I got offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies in 1 month. Consulting contracts worth more than Lena and I had made combined in our best years together. I was traveling again, spending weeks in different cities, living in nice hotels, eating at restaurants I chose because I liked them, not because they impressed anyone. I was successful by any measure. I was also lonely. Not lonely for Lena specifically. The memory of her had faded into something abstract, like a character from a book I'd read years ago. But lonely in the sense that I'd built this life, this career, this identity as the thorough consultant who got things done, and there was no one to share it with, no one who knew the whole story, no one who understood the cost of what I'd accomplished. 6 months after stepping down as trustee, I got an invitation to Arthur's company's annual shareholder meeting. Guest of the board, the invitation said, formal, proper. An acknowledgement that despite everything, I'd done work for them and they valued it. I almost didn't go. The thought of walking into that building, seeing Arthur again, maybe running into people who'd known Lena, felt like reopening something I'd been trying to heal from. But curiosity won. Or maybe it was ego. Maybe I wanted to be seen as the successful consultant, not the bitter ex-husband. The meeting was in the main auditorium, hundreds of shareholders and guests filling the seats. I found a spot in the back, far from the board section, content to observe. The meeting progressed through typical shareholder business. Financial reports, strategic updates, board elections. James gave the chair's report, talked about strong performance, new partnerships, ethical governance practices that had been strengthened over the past year. He didn't mention Lena by name, didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what strengthened governance practices meant. Then Arthur stepped to the podium for a special announcement. He looked older than when I'd last seen him, more gray in his hair, more lines in his face. As many of you know, I've served on this company's board for 32 years, including 10 as CEO and the last 3 as chair emeritus. It's been the honor of my professional life. He paused, gathered himself. However, effective at the end of this meeting, I'll be stepping down from the board entirely. It's time for new voices, new perspectives, and for me to step back and let the next generation lead without the complicated history I bring. Polite applause, surprised murmurs. Arthur was a fixture. The idea of him leaving seemed impossible. I want to thank my fellow board members, our executive team, and all the shareholders who've supported this company's growth. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes the hardest part of leadership is accepting when personal matters have created situations that are bigger than any one person's pride. His voice wavered slightly. We make policies to protect our companies. Sometimes those policies cost us personally. That's as it should be. The institution matters more than any individual. He stepped down to sustained applause. I realized, sitting in the back of that auditorium, that this was Arthur's way of admitting defeat. He couldn't fix what Lena had broken. He couldn't protect her from the consequences. And his presence on the board had become a reminder of that failure, a complication that the company no longer needed. So he was leaving. Quietly, with dignity, but leaving. After the meeting, people milled around the lobby. I was heading for the exit when a voice stopped me. Ethan Ward? I turned. A woman in her 40s, professional suit, confident smile. Yes? Sarah Chen. I'm the new Chief Strategy Officer. She extended her hand and I shook it. I wanted to introduce myself. I've heard a lot about you. All good, I hope. Depends on your definition of good, but definitely impressive. She glanced around the lobby. I know this might be awkward, given your history with my predecessor, but I wanted you to know that I've reviewed all the work you did. The governance review, the ethics investigation, the documentation. It was incredibly thorough. Thank you. I also wanted to tell you that we've completely restructured how we handle vendor relationships and conflict of interest disclosures. New policies, new training, new oversight mechanisms. A lot of that came from recommendations in your final report. That's good to hear. You probably saved us from much worse problems down the line. Who knows how many other relationships or conflicts we would have missed if you hadn't caught this one? She paused. I know it came at a personal cost, but from a corporate governance perspective, what you did was exactly right. I didn't know what to say to that. Just doing my job. Well, if you ever want to do that job here in a more official capacity, we're always looking for good consultants. James speaks very highly of you. We exchanged contact information, made vague promises to get coffee sometime, and parted ways. I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, stood on the sidewalk watching people stream past. Business people heading back to their offices, tourists taking photos of the harbor, life continuing in its 1,000 small ways. Sarah Chen's words stuck with me. Came at a personal cost. Had it. What had it cost me, really? My marriage to someone who'd lied to me for a year. My illusions about what that marriage had been. My position as the overlooked husband who'd accepted being treated as less than he was. Those weren't costs. Those were things I was better off without. But there was a cost I hadn't wanted to examine. The person I'd become in the process of proving I wasn't weak. The person who'd methodically destroyed careers, who'd taken control of someone's assets, who'd walked away from every plea for mercy with cold satisfaction. Was that person better than the dismissed husband I'd been before? Or just differently broken? I drove back to my apartment, opened my laptop, and looked at my calendar. Consulting gigs lined up for the next 3 months. Good money, important work, the kind of career I'd always wanted but never thought I'd have. And beneath all of it, the nagging question, now what? I'd proved I wasn't what Lena thought. I'd made her pay for underestimating me. I'd shown Arthur, shown Victor, shown everyone who'd dismissed me that I was capable of ruthless efficiency when necessary. Mission accomplished. So why did it feel like I'd won a prize I didn't want? That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was Lena or Victor trying some new approach. But curiosity made me look. Hi, Ethan. This is Madison. We met at the conference 6 months ago, had those 2 dinners. I know you said you weren't ready then, but I wanted to reach out because I heard about Arthur stepping down and thought you might want to talk to someone who understands complicated professional situations. No pressure, just coffee if you want it. I stared at the message. Madison, the lawyer. The second date where I'd been too busy comparing her to Lena to actually be present. I typed, Coffee sounds good. When are you free? Her response came in seconds. Tomorrow? 2 p.m.? Same place we went before? See you there. I showed up 15 minutes early, got us a table, ordered coffee. When Madison arrived, she smiled and sat down across from me. Thanks for meeting. Thanks for reaching out. That took some courage, given how our last conversation ended. I figured enough time had passed that maybe things were different. Are they? I thought about it. Yeah, different. I'm not sure better, but definitely different. We talked for 2 hours. Not about Lena, not about the divorce, not about any of it. We talked about her work, my work, what we'd been reading, places we wanted to travel, mundane things that felt surprisingly comfortable. At one point she said, You seem lighter than before, less like you were carrying something heavy. I handed off something I'd been carrying for too long. The Trust Administration? Among other things. She studied me. Can I ask you something direct? Go ahead. When we had dinner before, you were still in the middle of it all. The revenge, the consequences, all of it. Looking back now, was it worth it? I didn't answer immediately. The honest answer was complicated. I did what I thought was right. I exposed real ethical violations. I protected the company. I held people accountable for their actions. All of that was justified. That's not an answer. No, it's not. I looked at my coffee. The honest answer is I don't know. It was worth proving I wasn't who everyone thought I was. It wasn't worth the person I became while proving it. The balance sheet doesn't add up cleanly either way. That's fair. We finished our coffee and agreed to dinner the following week. Nothing serious, no pressure, just seeing where things went. As I walked home that evening, I realized I'd gone an entire conversation without thinking about Lena once. Without comparing Madison to her, without measuring the present against the past, without running the constant background analysis of what had gone wrong. Maybe that was progress, or maybe it just meant I was finally ready to be done with the story I'd been living for the past year. The divorce papers finally came through 3 weeks later. Signed, sealed, official. Lena had agreed to all the terms. No contest, no negotiation, just acceptance. We were legally done. I should have felt something. Relief, closure, satisfaction, anything. Instead, I just filed the papers in a drawer and went back to work. 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 Back to work.